Hello and welcome to our webinar on how to reboot EU sales with IOSS. And I'm really pleased we're doing this webinar because we're heading into what looks very much like a recession, even though last week we had a new prime minister. But people in the UK are going to have a lot less money in their pockets. And it's time to seriously start expanding our sales again. And for those that haven't yet, re-engage with European sales and actually maximize on the money that is out there. With EU sales expected to decline and spending to be constrained, the EU is a ready source of income to start replacing some of that. Now, I'm delighted today to be joined by Bobby from GFS once again, who's going to walk us through some of the complexities of selling to the EU that have come in since Brexit, which seems an awful long time ago. And in fact, it's a couple of years now, but I know people are still struggling with all of the red tape. So welcome, Bobby. I hope you're going to make our lives a bit easier today.
Thank you, Chris. Absolutely. I think there's definitely positive news amongst all this. And I think you've hit the nail on the head in that there is so much opportunity to grow sales outside of the domestic market. And of course, we can't ignore the EU because it's right on our doorstep. So hopefully this will shed some light on how, some of the businesses that we're talking to today can help, reboot their EU sales and grow their revenues.
So, Bobby, I know we've got a lot to get through today, so I want to dive in. But to
Mm-hmm.
start with, can you just tell us what the heck has changed since we were EU members? Um, what actually went on when when the UK left the EU?
Well, it all happened back on the 1st of January 2020. So the first fundamental change that happened was that we left the EU. So out on the 1st of January 2020, UK officially exits the EU. That means the end of free trade with the EU. What came in was the EU UK Trade Cooperation Agreement, which was signed on the 30th of December. So literally at the final, the final bell. And at that point, we started the transition period, which, if you remember, that lasted for 12 months, where we had a sort of honeymoon period where even though we'd left the EU, we were still able to trade freely with EU member states, subject to the rules of origin of where goods came from. But all that came to an end on the 31st of January when the trade borders came up and came into full force. So all goods imported to the EU were subject to customs clearance, duties and tariffs. So everything as we knew it before, came to an end on the 31st of January 2021. And since then, we've had to deal with customs borders.
And I remember the queues at Dover, but I think there's something else we need to cover as well, Bobby, because
Mm.
everything didn't automatically change on the 31st of July. There were some other changes that came in 6 months later than that, weren't there?
Yeah, so no sooner have we gotten over, felt the full force of Brexit on the 31st of January. We were then hit with the new EU VAT reforms on the 1st of July 2021. Now, something which I have to clarify because it's often misunderstood. The EU VAT reforms that came in have got nothing to do with Brexit. It's actually part of a global modernization of the VAT system, trying to make it fit for purpose for today's digital market. So on the
It's
1st of
just a shame
July,
the dates didn't match up, isn't it? Just to make life a bit easier.
absolutely. Well, they were supposed to, but there was a delay. So, but the whole drive behind this was to try and make, modernize VAT for today's digital market, and also to try and prevent a lot of the fraud that was going on. So out on the 1st of July, what we knew as the minimum €22 threshold So anything that we sold from a distance and imported to, to consumers in the EU, um, if it was now it did no longer applied that you can have this minimum threshold of 22 euro value, okay, which meant that as of the 1st of July, now that that de minimis threshold was taken away, all low value B2C, so business to consumer imports sold to private EU consumers were subject to VAT regardless of value. So what that meant for non-EU based businesses was that there were no more VAT exemption thresholds, right? Which meant that if you were selling via your own website, you have to be able to charge VAT at the point of checkout and collect VAT. And similarly, but if you're selling on a marketplace, then the marketplace is deemed as the seller and the marketplace is liable for VAT, compliance and payments. If you're selling in both places, then you still have to be, charging, you're still going to be liable for VAT on the sales on your own website. And just to make it even more interesting, there's no standard VAT rate that's applicable. The VAT rate that has to be calculated and charged is going to be subject to the VAT rates that apply in the market or in the EU country where the goods are going to be delivered. So where the customer is. Okay, so nice and simple.
Yeah. So, Bobby, I remember when this happened, and a lot of businesses looked at it on the 1st of January and said, hey, I've got to now register for VAT in all of these countries. It's going to be really expensive to get the registrations and everything done. But in 6 months' time, I can change to IOSS. So I'm not going to spend all of that money. I'm just going to stop sales for 6 months. But at that time, we were in the middle of the pandemic. And
we've got the pandemic.
Not every business, but most businesses, their sales had gone through the roof because everyone was sat bored at home, and honestly, people would buy anything to keep themselves busy. I've lost count of how many jigsaws I bought during that time and bits and pieces to do around the house. So many retailers saw a huge uptick in sales, and they didn't worry too much that they'd lost their EU sales for 6 months. But I think one of the big problems is they never really restarted those sales. And I think that the post-Brexit impact on EU trade was a lot bigger than perhaps businesses actually felt in real terms because of that pandemic boost. So what were the impacts that we were seeing around that time that people may have missed? What was the impact on EU trade for businesses?
Well, you mentioned some of them already, Chris. We saw backlogs of lorries being queued up outside Dover because suddenly they were taking hours and hours to process paperwork and get through red tape. Another thing, of course, was that parcels were arriving to EU customers in France, Germany, wherever they were. And suddenly that customer would get a call from the local mail company saying, we've got your parcel, but you need to come and pay us this much in duties before we can release your parcel. So you can imagine what an awful experience that was. And we suddenly also saw a lot of parcels actually being rejected and being returned back to the UK because customers were refusing to pay these surprise costs. So parcel, lorry backlogs, parcels being returned, parcel backlogs being stuck at customs borders. These were just some of the many things that we saw. And of course, this had the impact of falling UK exports to the EU.
And I remember at the time, even some couriers, they had to pause collections for EU and even return parcels before they'd left the UK because the paperwork just wasn't right. It was an absolute nightmare at the time. And sadly, it kind of didn't even stop there, though, did it? Because since the pandemic, that the whole global supply chain has been hit, And tell us a bit about that. What else have we seen since the initial problems with Brexit?
Well, you said it as well before, Chris. It was a pandemic. The pandemic has caused huge ripples and disruption across the global supply chain. So, with bottlenecks of products, but bottlenecks of having to divert products, say, from shipments, say, from China, to them having to diversify sourcing to other countries, meant that, we've got containers stuck in China that actually we need to have in Europe or other countries to bring supplies from other markets. So it's every element across the supply chain, whether it's the source, whether it's at the source of where products are being manufactured, how we get products shipped in bulk in containers to where they're needed so that they can be sold. And then on top of that, we've had, economic uncertainty that's coming from as a result of war in Ukraine, rising inflation. It's impacting the cost of fuel and also consumers' pockets. So there's a lot of uncertainty, in addition to everything that we've had to deal with Brexit. So the bottom line is that, on the one hand, it's getting, cross-border selling, and the logistics of that of becoming more and more complex and costly. But at the same time, in order to survive and thrive, businesses have got to find a way through that so that they can still tap into those markets and grow their sales.
Yeah, and I think there's so much going on in the world that we miss half of it. I'm thinking of the Dockers strike last month, where Felix Day, they were off for 8 days, and kind of, I think the number was something like 47% of all containers shipping into the UK go through that one port. So taking 8 days off striking, that's got massive impacts.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you've talked a lot of doom and gloom, Bobby. I'm hoping you've got some good news for us.
Absolutely.
So, talking kind of in real basic, simple terms, tell us a bit more about sort of the whole purpose of this webinar, which is IOSS. What is it, and how can it make our lives easier?
Okay, so IOSS is, first of all, let me say, there's always it's not doom and gloom. There's always a way forward. And IOSS is called the Import One Stop Shop. That's what IOSS stands for. And it was launched on the 1st of July in 2021. It's an EU scheme that is regulated and governed by the EU Commission. And the whole idea behind it is to help simplify the collection, declaration, and payment to VAT to the EU on long distance sales of imported goods. So it's to help take out some of the pain of, typical e-commerce selling. It's only for low value. Sorry.
If you remember, Bobby, when I said a lot of people stopped selling on the 1st of January and they were waiting for the 1st of July, this is what they were waiting for, to simplify their VAT. But still, I know a lot of people haven't gotten around to actually implementing it because obviously the pandemic made them so busy. So I think this is really important. This is what we were waiting for, to make our lives easier.
Absolutely, and it's the reason behind it. So the VAT reform was not to penalize e-commerce businesses, especially smaller e-commerce businesses. The EU reform was to modernize EU VAT and ensure that the big players were being honest about paying VAT and to avoid fraud. So this scheme, as you said, was introduced to simplify, make life simpler for typical online sellers selling to the EU. So it applies for low value B2C sales up to the value of 150 euros. and it's for businesses that are selling from outside of the EU. What it allows you to do is to register once. So pick your whichever EU member state you want to register in. You register just once and you submit a single periodic submission. So probably monthly via an online portal. And that covers you for all 27 EU members countries. Okay, so single registration, single monthly return, and you can fulfill all your VAT obligations across the entire EU. It's less cost, so that's going to bring down your overheads. So it helps you save money. Definitely a lot of red tape when it comes to, it helps reduce red tape when you're going through customs, and I'll explain that in a minute when we talk about IOSS delivery services. But essentially it means that goods shipped under IOSS are VAT exempt when they arrive at the customs border, which means they don't have to go, customs are not going to be collecting VAT, and the parcels can be released much faster and go through. Also means that your customer is not going to be contacted to say you need to pay VAT before you collect your parcel, because that VAT would have been collected at the point of sale. So it's a better customer experience for your customer, and it makes life easier for you as the seller.
So this sounds brilliant, Bobby, but what is not actually included in the scheme? Because that's also important to know.
So this is only for B2C, which means that B2B transactions, business to business, are not covered under the new EU VAT rules. Cross-border B2B transactions are subject to the same rules that have been in place since Brexit. So the rules depend on where the goods are coming from, who the importer of record is, and what country they're imported to. So it does not apply to B2B sales, and it does not apply to goods that are subject to excise duties. So these are indirect taxes that are applied to things such as tobacco and alcohol.
So pretty much it covers most sales, because most of the time, especially for sort of e-commerce, people that are selling on marketplaces or their own website, they're selling to consumers. So just about everything is covered up to that €150 value.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, brilliant. This is what I was after. How do you do the shipping under IOSS? I was going to ask, it sounds really, really good. But if I ship 2 parcels, one's covered under IOSS, one's not covered under IOSS, how when it gets to the border, how do they know which parcels are covered and which ones aren't?
That's because the parcel that's being shipped under IOSS is going to have an IOSS registration number. Okay, so when the customs officer looks at that, they know that VAT has already been collected. They will look on the commercial invoice and see that there's an IOSS number on there, that they will see how much VAT has been taken and how it's been calculated. But don't forget, on that commercial invoice, it still needs to have all the other mandatory commodity information that's required for customs clearance. So your HS code, description, weight, value, country of origin. Okay, so when you're shipping under IOSS, first and foremost, you have to have collected the VAT at the point of sale. So when your customer comes to the checkout on your website, or if they're coming to a marketplace, buying your goods on a marketplace, the VAT would have been calculated and displayed to the customer at the point of purchase. So when they pay for the goods, that's also including any VAT that would be applicable. Okay. Once when that order gets picked, packed, and shipped, you create the commercial invoice. Okay. This needs to be digital, okay, because for smooth customs clearance and to prevent a risk of fraud, it's better to be able to transmit all the information, the customs information that the carrier or the courier is going to need when they present those goods at the border digitally. So creating the digital commercial invoice, you need to include the IOSS VAT identification number, as well as all the other mandatory information. And like I said, ensure that when it comes to labeling and dispatch, that your systems support paperless trade. So what that means is that all the information that the courier is going to need, you're not giving it to them on a physical commercial invoice. You are entering that in the system, and that system then is transmitting it digitally to the carrier.
And I guess when the carrier turns up at the port, they've just got an electronic manifest. They're not handing over a bit of paper for each individual parcel, because for a carrier with maybe, I don't know, 5,000, 10,000 parcels on board, that's just not going to be possible.
Absolutely. And there's a good reason for digital, data transmission, because people make errors. So if you're filling in physical paperwork that manually, then you could get things wrong. But also somebody else can take your IOS number and use it for their purposes. And you don't want that to happen, which is why digital is always best.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So now we need to talk about how sort of some of the mechanics of how you do that under IOS. So you got a lot of points on this next slide, Bobby.
I'll keep it
But I think
simple.
it's
Yeah.
important to go through. So let's just take a little time to look about what you need to do.
Well, let's remember that IOS is all to do with VAT compliance, right? And there's two sides of it. There is the IOS shipping under IOS, which enables that friction-free, getting your parcels through seamlessly, right? Provided, of course, you've provided all the other mandatory information. But first and foremost, you also there's a certain number of steps you need to take to make sure that you are registered for IOS and fulfill your VAT requirements under IOS. So if you're not based in the EU, then you need to appoint an EU-based intermediary. So that is an accounting firm that has got a branch, say, in one of the EU member states. So that could be Ireland, for example, who will declare and pay VAT on behalf of the non-EU seller. Okay, so you appoint your intermediary. They register you for IOS so that you get your IOS VAT registration number. That's done. Then the next thing you do is update your website so that when, like we said before, when your customer comes to purchase online and they get to the checkout, they can see very clearly what they're paying in terms of the goods, the VAT that's been calculated and applied, and as well as any other duties that have been added to that, as well as their delivery costs. So that needs to be updated so that you can apply the correct VAT rate for the customer depending on where the goods are going to be shipped. For marketplace sales, we've mentioned before, you can use the marketplace's IOS number, and the marketplace is responsible for collecting and declaring VAT. And then when you come to ship your goods, then the VAT collected needs to be on the commercial invoice for it to get through the border. Okay, so you need to be able to provide all that mandatory customs information, provide that to the courier that's going to be presenting your parcels for customs clearance. Yeah, so that'll be the IOS VAT identification number, whether that's yours or the marketplace's. And then, like I said before, all the mandatory information that they require for customs clearance as well, because it's not just VAT clearance, you've still got the standard customs clearance to go through. Then the last thing to do is every month, your EU-based intermediary we'll file the monthly VAT declaration, and then you'll be required, and we'll let you know what you're required to pay in terms of VAT to the EU. And those records, any records of sales that have been made under IOSS, you need to keep those records for a minimum of 10 years.
So I've got to ask Bobby, it sounds quite simple, apart from one thing.
Yeah.
And that is, how do I find an EU-based intermediary? What does that mean? And what would you recommend if I want to register and I don't have anyone based in the EU? Where do I go? Who do I speak to?
There are lots of companies that provide this service. We partner with, our partner is Simply VAT. But if anybody listening on this call, you simply have to do a Google search. Search for EU intermediary IOSS, and there'll be multiple options coming up. But beware, their rates and the cost of providing this service are going to vary. So shop around.
So shop around or consider Simply VAT, and we'll make sure at the end of this webinar you've got contact details for GFS so that they can put you in touch with their chosen partner if you want. But
Absolutely.
I think it's worth having a look though at the different shipping options to the EU, Bobby, both with and without IOSS, just to give us an idea of what it's actually going to do for us, and more importantly, what it's going to do for the consumer.
Yeah, there's pros and cons. There's different options, and there's pros and cons to each. So the first option is you ship it duty unpaid, or DDU would be the Incoterm. So the customer places an order online, they pay for their goods online, you ship, pack, you pick, pack, fulfill, ship it off. The parcel arrives at the customs border. At that point, it's going to be held. The customer is going to get a call that says, we've got a parcel for you, but we can't release it until you've come and paid the VAT and any other duties that are that are applicable. So at that point, there's not only extra cost and handling, because now there's more procedures that your courier has got to go through. There's more customs touch points that have to be done. So it costs more money, and there's also the delay, right? And at that point, your customer may decide, actually, I'll reject it. I don't want this. So provided they don't reject it, at that point, the parcel can be released, and then it can be delivered to the customer's door by the final mile carrier. Okay, so that's what we call duty unpaid, and some of the people listening today may already be using the DDU delivery services to the EU. So it's an option, but potentially it's not a great customer experience. There are multiple delays, and there's also higher handling costs. Okay. If we now compare that to shipping duty paid, you've got two options. You've got shipping duty paid under IOSS, or you can do it duty at place, or DAP. Okay. What it means, essentially, they're both very similar in that when the customer places their order online, when they make their order online, they're going to be charged VAT. The VAT is either going to be collected directly when they purchase online, if it's IOSS, or the duty can already have been paid up front by either by the seller. But it means that when it gets to customs, there's no duty, there's no VAT to be collected. So the customer's not going to get a call. The parcel will be on its way to the customer without any unnecessary delay or unnecessary handling costs. But don't forget that one of the benefits of IOSS is that if you're shipping under IOSS, you still only have to do one single VAT registration, one single VAT return each month. If you're shipping under DAP, then you don't have the benefits of a single registration or single filing. You need to have to register in each country that you're selling to individually, and also submit individual VAT reports to each of those markets. So a lot more administrative overhead, a lot more complexity and cost.
Yeah, so it sounds like IOSS is a lot simpler because having been VAT registered in the past just for the UK, I know what a nightmare it is filling out VAT returns. And I only had to do that quarterly, not monthly. So 27 monthly VAT returns it should be enough in itself to get me down the IOSS route. So, Bobby, tell us a bit more about how IOSS works. Kind of how does the flow work from setting up, getting the money, shipping the parcel? Talk me through the whole process of what happens.
Well, look, if we bring it all together, this is what the big picture looks like. So you've got your first step, which is setting up IOSS. Okay, so that's appointing your EU intermediary. They register you for IOSS. You then set up your IOSS delivery and return services. And you also, and these things don't have to be done sequentially, but these are all the things you need to do for setup. So then the last piece that you need to update is your website, so that when the customers come to buy, your website automatically calculates and displays the right VAT calculation. Yeah, so that's the setup. Once you've done your setup, you're good to go. So you can start selling online. Your customer places the order. They get to check out. The VAT and any duties is already calculated for them. They're happy with that. They check out. Now we've got the physical delivery. So order flows through to the retailer's warehouse or to your third-party fulfillment partner. Orders picked and packed. The shipment is raised. So you need the software and the tools to be able to raise the shipment, generate the digital invoice, the commercial invoice, which is going to include not only the IOSS VAT number, but also your IORI number, harmonization codes, etc. That is transmitted digitally to the carrier so that they have that information. Parcel gets collected, it's shipped, it arrives at the customs border, it's cleared through because all the information, correct information, is presented on the commercial invoice, delivered to the customer. Okay, so that's the physical. And then the last step is the monthly return. So on a monthly basis, your intermediary will complete a monthly online return. So that will be done through the IOSS portal. They will submit the IOSS, the monthly VAT return, and notify you of what VAT you have to pay. And like I said, that's one return, one payment, and that's all you need to do to cover you, regardless of where you've sold, provided it's within the EU member states.
So, Bobby, that's an awful lot of information in a short time. And we still got quite a lot to get through, I know, but just quickly summarize what makes IOSS good for business, and then tell us about how much time and money can it actually save us?
Sure. Well, it saves a lot of time. The EU Commission state that using IOSS can probably reduce red tape by about 95%. We've already said it saves time because you register. It's one registration, one monthly return, and that covers you for all 27 EU member states. The IOSS identification number makes customs clearance faster and smoother, less risk of parcel delay. So it's good for your business, saves you money also because in terms of cash flow, you're doing one VAT return each month. Okay, hopefully mean less handling fees, lower courier fees for VAT clearance services. And you just pay one tax authority in one currency. So you're not going to be, having to fiddle around with different currencies. And we've already mentioned the lower handling costs. So saves time for your business, saves money for your business, but there's also the benefit of a much better customer experience in that your customer has full transparency at the point of purchase of what they're paying for. So they can be confident that the price they pay is the correct price and they're not going to get any nasty surprises when their parcel arrives in country. And the ease of payment, because the VAT payment is, your customer, that VAT is collected at the point of purchase. So saves time for your business, saves money for your business, and it's a good customer experience for your customer.
Fantastic. So is there anything else we need to know? And is this something that is actually well known across the industry by now? It's been like a year and a half. Is this something everyone should already be aware of?
Well, there was a recent study by the Centre of Economics and Business Research, the CEBR, which was released in March 2022. And they stated that in the first 12 months, so from January 2020 to January 2021, so in the first 12 months of us leaving the EU, there was a drop of 45% in EU revenues in EU trade between the UK and the EU. Now, they reckon that had IOSS been introduced sooner, that loss could have been reduced by at least 11% or close to 7 billion euros. Okay. So IOSS definitely has got a lot of benefits, but surprisingly, when they surveyed UK firms, more than 23% of them were unaware of IOSS and the benefits of IOSS, which is really quite, horrifying, because it
It's
almost
almost a
sounds like a
quarter.
no-brainer.
Yeah. So we should all be aware of this by now, but I know we're not. Can you give us a couple of examples of businesses that have been using it successfully?
Yeah. Okay, so I can share a couple of our customers with you. So here we have, I can't give you the name, but let's just say it's a Premier League football club. Now, like all Premier League football clubs, they sell a lot of merchandise through their online shop, and they ship it around the world. So pre-Brexit, we were handling, upwards of 1 million parcels for them that were being shipped worldwide. They saw a 600% increase in international sales over 8 years. The challenge they had was that once we entered Brexit and the borders came up in the EU, they couldn't afford, they needed to be absolutely certain that when fans ordered new kit, for example, that those parcels were going to get delivered on time, completely, seamlessly. So they needed to not only ensure a reliable service, but protect the delivery experience. And the solution they've been using since Brexit is using the GFS e-commerce IOSS services, plus tracked and also our technology GFS checkout, which means that when the fans get to purchase something in the online store, GFS checkout, our technology will calculate the VAT as well as the customs documentation, as well as the other duties that are applicable at the point of purchase. But also similarly, they'll use our technology GFS selector for paperless trade. So to create the commercial invoices and the supporting documentation that's needed when the parcel is shipped.
I'm looking at the chat with a red scarf that he's waving and thinking, I think I know which team this is. But I also think a lot of people that are listening to this webinar, they'll be thinking that club is massive. that's not me. Can you give us an example of a business that's kind of more of the entrepreneur running their own business rather than the massive
Yeah.
football club?
Yeah, absolutely, because IOSS is relevant to all businesses regardless of size. So here we've got another of our customers, Strings Direct. Now, unless you're into guitars, you may not know who Strings Direct are, but they are the UK's #1 string specialist. So all they sell online is anything and everything to do with different types of strings for stringed instruments. Now, a lot of their business was coming from the EU, but since Brexit, immediately after Brexit, they saw a 30% drop in EU sales. To be honest, what they felt was there was just too much red tape, too difficult, also much more expensive because they were feeling the pinch of higher shipping and handling costs, and they were getting, bad customer feedback, angry customers who were being, told they needed to pay VAT that they weren't expecting. So they've implemented the GFS e-commerce services, which I'll explain later on. This is a multi-tiered service that gives customers the choice of using IOSS services, but also DDP and DDU if that's better for them. And also these services were already pre-integrated with their VisualSoft platform, which was even better. Now, how that's benefited them is that since then, it's taken the pain out of shipping. The owner said to me, well, the warehouse people aren't complaining, so that's a really good
Always
sign.
a good
And we're
move.
not getting we're not getting negative customer reviews on Trustpilot, which is excellent. So it's good for our customers, good for our business, and it's saving us a lot of money. And yes, they're beginning to see their EU sales build up, recover those lost sales over time. So I think they're seeing 7% increase month on month. So it's gradually getting back up to where it needs to be.
That's fantastic, and a really good place to finish talking about IOSS, to know that it makes a difference and it does increase EU sales. But I'm looking at the time, Bobby, and I know we're running out of time. We're running over a little bit already. But very briefly, can you just tell us about some of the services? You've talked about sort of GF e-commerce plus and a few other things. Can you tell us what GFS can do to help us?
So GFS, we're the e-commerce industry's largest provider of multi-carrier services. So we through us, businesses can access all the different courier services through the one relationship with GFS. But we've also developed our own multi-tiered service, which we call GFS International E-commerce Services. And there's 3 levels. There is International Plus, there's Economy Tracked, and Economy Untracked. Now, we've designed these services specifically for e-commerce businesses that are looking for reliable, cost-effective services, perfect for e-commerce parcels up to 2 kilograms. They cover not just, we can use this service not just for the EU, but for any international country outside of the UK. So it covers 220 plus countries, so EU and rest of world, recognized by all the major marketplaces. And more importantly, there are no fuel surcharges, which is a big thing today when we've seen surcharges, increasing on average by 20 to 30% over the last few months.
Yeah, and fuel surcharges always just seem like a hidden way of putting your prices up anyway to me. But tell us a bit about the international features you've got.
Well, as well as the services, so we've talked about the services. That goes hand in hand with the technology, our software. So when you buy the services from us, we also provide the technology, the tools you're going to need such as GFS checkout, which will calculate your duties and taxes at the point of checkout. You have GFS Selector, which enables you to raise shipments and create electronic customs declarations for paperless trade. And then we've also got GFS Global Returns Pro, which is an online portal to enable customers to then return any orders that they don't want. So we give you the bundle, which includes the services, but also you get the technology with us so that you can provide customers with a complete outbound, inbound service.
And when it says it automatically calculates local duties and produces electronic customs declaration, is this all done in the background? Do I need to go in and put all of the EU VAT rates that are relevant for me, or is that all done for me?
It's all done automatically and maintained automatically. So that's through dynamic feeds. Behind checkout, we are our VAT and our VAT engine is a direct feed from Avalara, so it's powered by Avalara. But that means nothing to the to the retailer. This is really about saying that GFS checkout provides you with the tools so that you can confidently calculate dynamically what the VAT is for each that's going to be applicable on each order, dependent on where that's being shipped.
And Bobby, I'm not particularly technical. I know all of this stuff exists, but how difficult is it to get this checkout onto my website?
The answer to that is it depends on if you've got a standard website, then it's straightforward. But if you've got a website that's been adapted or has been built from scratch and is bespoke, then obviously it's going to be more complicated. So it really all depends on what your website, really all depends on your own website.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. Now, Bobby, I've got a couple of questions come in that I want to get to, but just before that, I know we've got a special offer for retailers who are shipping 75 parcels a day for a free EU delivery review. Can you just tell us what am I going to get in that review and how do I actually get it?
So essentially what that means is that we will, you can speak to a GFS delivery expert who is going to be able to understand what it is that we'll ask questions around what you're shipping, where you're shipping it, what types of products they are, what kind of delivery options you want to be offering to your customers. So they will look at everything that you're doing around delivery, whether that's just delivery within the EU or whether they want you would rather they looked at the entire big picture. And from there, they can provide you with the best advice in terms of what's going to help, what's going to make the most sense to ensure that you've got the right mix of services and also the right support, whether that is advice, delivery expertise and advice from us, but also software tools to help make shipping as seamless and as pain-free as possible, whether you're talking about EU or any other cross-border shipping, because let's face it, it's complicated. But let's not forget that one thing that Brexit has done for us, and it's something which I've been harping on about for years, is that it's finally jolted us out of the comfort of just selling to the EU and at home because we've not had to deal with borders. Since Brexit, most businesses now know what an EORI number is, have now had all their products harmonized. They understand a lot more about customs documentation than they did before. So now that all that has been set up, we now have the passport to ship and sell to not just the EU, but anywhere in the world. So the world is our oyster.
So this is, although it's a review of EU delivery, the 75 parcels a day doesn't have to be to the EU. It could be mostly the UK, a few to the EU, a few to the rest of the world, some to Australia, sometime to the US. So if you're interested in looking and having a proper, robust review of your delivery by industry specialists, then look out for an email that should be coming in about an hour's time after the end of this webinar. But Bobby, we are kind of out of time, but I've just picked out two of the questions that have come in. Question number one, if I'm selling on a marketplace, do I need to register for IOSS, or does the marketplace do it all for me?
If you're only selling on the marketplace, then the marketplace would be deemed as the seller. So they would be liable for the VAT collection and declaration. If you're selling on the marketplace and on your own website, then you would still need to register and fulfill your VAT obligations for all the sales that are coming through your website.
Okay, brilliant. And the next question, I think, refers to a website, and it's a bit of a long one, so I'm going to read it out. Our EU sales dropped 35%, but to be honest, it's not the VAT, but all of the red tape and the customs compliance. How can we make this simpler?
That's really, and that's really one of the main points from this is that IOSS addresses the VAT. What it doesn't simplify, what it doesn't do is, whichever way you look at it, cross-border shipping is complex. Okay, it's complex.
And this is all of the harmonized codes and everything that you've been talking about.
Yeah, this is to do with getting parcels in and out through a border. There has to be, there's going to be customs compliance as well as VAT compliance where that's applicable, which makes it complicated. So if the question is, how do we make this simpler? The question really is coming back to you, which is, how confident are you that your delivery partner is able and is giving you the advice, sharing with you the advice and expertise that you need to make sure that they can make it as simple for you as possible. So by making sure that they are able to advise on the documentation you need, support you in making sure that that documentation is correct and accurate, all this is going to make reduce risk and make it simple. It's very easy to buy carrier service from someone, but what you have to be more selective about is someone that can also provide that proactive support and has the delivery know-how and expertise that you can rely on.
Oh, thanks, Bobby. And I'm guessing my best advice for that person, because I don't know the answers, would be to wait for the email and book a free delivery review with GFS and get some professional help. And if you want to get there in a hurry, then you can always visit the website, which is simply gfsdeliver.com. But watch out for that email that will be hitting your inbox shortly. And if you are watching this webinar on YouTube and you didn't register for it, then gfsdeliver.com is how you can get in touch with Bobby and her team. So, Bobby, I really want to thank you for all of your insight and help today. There's been a lot to get through, and we will, of course, make this available as a recording, so anyone that wants to rewatch it can. But I would strongly encourage anyone that wants to, if you've got any questions on international delivery, book a free delivery review with GFS. It's not a sales pitch. They'll go through everything from best way of printing labels to running your warehouse to customs to IOSS and VAT. If you've got questions, they're there to help you, and it's not going to cost you anything. So, Bobby, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.